Sunscreen is for those who need the sun to screen their radiation pores. I'm a big fan of radiation. I think radiation is actually what keeps the world going. You know, that's world population control. Like this podcast, it's very microwavable. Very little effort, very little time spent, and when you taste it, you're like, it's good for what it is. Yeah, welcome to episode 196 of the Often Be Podcast with Clint Nelson. I'm your host, Clint Nelson. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, but most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to suck some titties. Oh, I'm bringing the energy. Drink, because I'm ready to down a few bitches in this pod. Not literal bitches, because we don't commit bestiality around here. But yeah, recording this at 1:38 a.m. Eastern on May 26th. Jesus Christ, life's going by fast. On May 26th, 2023. Yeah. This podcast is the gold standard of if you just keep doing it, someone will accidentally listen. Yeah, the numbers are going up. Kind of. Batman, turn your head, now you're getting pistol whipped by the Batman. I was actually, not only when people come up to you and assume because you look like a fictional creature, so they assume that you watch that stuff. So, I enjoy the comic book movies. I like Batman, I like Superman. I like all that good stuff. Thor, you know. The thing is I'm not really, and this is kind of different, I'm not really into anime on a just surface level. I'm not talking about like the commercialized children like on the Cartoon Network and stuff back in the day like Dragon Ball Z and Yu-Gi-Oh! Because when I think of those shows, I don't really think it's anime, even though technically it is, but you get what I'm saying. But like there's something weird about someone being into that world as they get older, and they almost seem more attached to it. I don't know, I just kind of think that anime is kind of an immature, childish thing when you get to a certain point in your life. And I don't tell anyone what to do with their lives, but when I get accused of doing childish things or being into things that are considered man-childish, right? There's this thing where it's like, I see these grown people being obsessed with characters that words don't even mouth with the words that they're saying. It almost looks like some cheap animation, unpopular opinion. And I get the whole storytelling. I get all that stuff. I'm not trying to shit on anime, but what I am saying is, it can't good like anime. But what I am saying is, I just kind of think that anime is this really, it's a trendy thing. I think that's the main thing. I think there's a lot of people that start watching it as they're older, and they may have never been into that because it's trendy. The bitch is trendy. Thanks, Drake. Drake's got a line for everything. And that's the thing, like, I can't really sit here and reference just, like, specific anime shows. You know why? Because I don't fucking watch anime. But when you get to an age and, like, that's, like, your thing, there's something weird about that. Like, escapism. Oh, baby, I'll escape into your isms. Anyone that's got isms, like these sayings of life, they'll always say their name, isms. Oh, I got grandma blankisms. You know, when you leave after dark, the only thing you'll be getting is, a dark future. Because nothing good happens after 3 a.m. It's like the saying, there's only 3 things open after 4 a.m. Waffle House, gas stations, and vagina. That's like what the grandmothers used to say. I think that's how it goes, right? I mentioned a lot about vagina on the show, even though I'm not really into that. Not into vagina, but I'm not into the obsession with talking about vagina. That just made me. If you're a first time listener, I think you kind of already assume my sexuality at this point. It's the cult of sexuality. And anime is really a cult. Kind of not joking. Because they make these I guess cartoons in general, we just put life's lessons and morals and ways of living, and we put in this decorative, cartoonish, and it's accessible. But if you were to put that in a real TV show of these same lessons, it would be a lot of outcry. Since it's anime, people just kind of it's an excuse to get lost into something and be something that's not real. Damn, I sound like an old fucking head. And I have friends that watch anime, and they are productive members of society. They are very successful, some of them, and they do a lot of good for themselves. There's nothing wrong with watching it, but it just generally, if we're going to be honest, the assumption, the generalization I make when a grown man, or I guess even woman to an extent, watch anime and really delved into that world, it's damn, you're you've given up. Not given up, but there's definitely a real escape. And escapism is this fascinating thing where there's the usual suspects for what escapism is. Escapism is the easy stuff. Whether that's drugs, whether that's alcohol, whether that's vagina. Which actually that is a form of escapism. These big sins that, these religious heads will try to, and now gambling. It's escapism. It's what's not escaping? When I could go do shit with money that I win off this, and how easy it is to make money doing that than going to spend 6 hours of my life to go, put my body through some strenuous activity, or go sit somewhere because I've conducted that once, filled out an application that I want to work here. Now I have to work there, and they expect me to show up at times and places, but I could just spend X amount of dollars and win 8 to 10 times that amount by literally not contributing to why that amount is going to either win or lose. Someone else, some stranger, is going to get more than 6 rebounds. Some stranger is going to take less than 4 3-pointers. And I'm going to win $100. But we have these outcry of, these gambling. Really, honestly, these sins that these, gambling, these very narcotic. Ooh, there's a word. These narcotic type of things that, yes, because they're so obsessive, they can become very addictive to the mind. And I get it. Whether it's that, sex, gambling, drugs, and all the alcohol, it can all overtake your life, and you ride or die with how those things affect and make you feel and your moods. And it starts off as a fun thing, but then it turns into this rolling ball if you're actually good at this shit. And you're like, man, why have a job when I can do this? Because I think, looking into it, you still actually, if you make a reasonable income gambling or doing any of this stuff, you actually do. If you make X amount, you do have to claim it as income. And it's absurd that we would even call this income. But Jesus, keep it coming. But yeah, I admit, I'm starting to really get into this shit. And I haven't done the real gambling. I haven't sat at a table and tried to hide my cards and I got a Royal Straight, and then 10K was on the line, Casino Royale with James Bond. It ain't that serious. Gambling on like certain things is barely legal where I live, but there's certain legal ways you can do this stuff. It just can't be, apparently for sports, you can't gamble on the game like spreads and stuff, but you can do individual players more or less of this. And I just gotta say, man, like anyone that shames gambling, like I don't understand. Like I understand we have gambling hotlines, gambling addiction. It's a thing for a reason. There's rehab centers that exist for a reason. But those are also scams. So like, hey, well, you just lost, your whole life savings on gambling because you were this bad person, but please give us $30,000 so you can stay here a month, even though you just spent your whole life savings. Because this will make your life a lot easier after you leave here. It's like, hey, and then we call it, hey, I can't pay this debt. It's like, did you not take the 5-step process we took that we taught you? It's like, yeah, you may have this debt, but you know what you're going to have? You're going to have your family. You're going to have peace of mind. You're going to have a new grasp of sensation and purpose in your life. And you're not going to let something control you. It's like, yeah, because the thing controlling me is you now with this debt. So I have a different type of debt to pay that I don't even enjoy paying. I didn't even volunteer to come here. I was interventioned because I had no money left. And it's funny how our solutions when people don't have money is, hey, go pay for something that's exponentially more money when you have no money. Well, you know what? No matter what, you got to invest in yourself. Yeah, you know what? You know who sells those invest in yourself people? People who took buyouts. People who took money from other people and companies. Like, to literally invest in yourself, you have to actually have something to invest in yourself. Just as like, oh, you just gotta constantly, keep the ice cream churning. It's like, all right, man. I'm just here to say, I think gambling should be 100% legal. It's weird we have this thing, this like anti-fringe on gambling type of thing. And I get how much it could ruin families. I get, but you know what? If I were to ever lose my wife, or my girlfriend, or I don't know, maybe not my kids. Yeah, that's where I draw a line. But the ladies, the wives and girlfriends, you're a dime a dozen. Kidding. Mostly. But I can't just replace my child. I sound like a complete douchebag. I do not mean to come off the way I'm coming off. But it's like, you can always repair your image. And if a woman leaves you or divorces you, you can't really repair your image if your children have nothing to do with you anymore because of your personal decisions that are deemed harmful to self or unreliable. You're financially unreliable. Or you're just not really. No one can rely on you to be stable because you're in this constant influx of money and shit. It's like, but if I were to have someone leave me because I have a quote-unquote gambling problem, I would not flinch one bit because I would just keep placing bets. I think maybe the reason why I gamble, because the things people are willing to do to pay off certain bets and shit, that if they really get deep in the rabbit hole, they really get deep into it. I understand, like, oh shit, like, yeah, it's like the things people are willing to do to pay off these things, it's pretty scary. But if you keep it disciplined and you just keep winning, just stop losing. Jesus. But nah, I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, moral of the story is, I think gambling's fine. It doesn't need to be vilified. We have to look at this with like this 20-foot pole. And I used to be this. I didn't like get the whole point of like gambling. Like I get it, but at the same time, I was like, this just seems like a waste of money, right? And if you keep losing, it's a waste of money. But when you win, there is this feeling of, damn, life is so fucking easy. And when you lose, you're like, damn, life is also that fucking easy at losing. Ooh. It's weird how I can place something, literally spend 2 minutes of effort into something, put $15 in. Fuck it, put $20 in. I put $20 of $20 of money, and depending on what you do, I on this thing that I'm doing, I can win $200, so $180 of profit. Essentially, by going to work, going about my day, I can literally I can make 2 days full of pay with actually only working one. Literally by putting one bet in, profit included, I basically 2 minutes of effort equaled 10 to 11 hours of actual labor of what I do at the time. Think about that. Like something you didn't even have to do. You're not even the control. It's this, and that's kind of the thrill of it, is that you have no power of how this thing ends, of how it works, how it does it. Everything is out of your hands once you give them whatever you got in your hands. All of it is out. And all of it is dependent on things you have nothing to do with. And that's kind of the thrill of it. But I don't know. People lose their lives. People lose loved ones over it. It's a real thing. I think people only have a problem with gambling if their partner is losing money. If your partner is winning money, like you're like, hey, you know what? It's just a hobby. Yeah, it's just a fun little hobby. A couple $500 a month he makes extra doing this. Like, oh, okay, whatever. But yeah, but it could be also one of the things where some appears to be so easy, is deemed to be so easy, that you also take for granted of how easy it is to lose money. As easy as something is to get is as easy as it is to lose. And that's why you gotta watch out for these pregnancy tests. But any jizz. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Now we're gonna go to the next phase. Okay, transition. Can't wait till I do. Wink, wink. Oh yeah, by the way, today's sponsor, it's a good old friend for the video, Dunkin' Donuts. Me and Dunkin' have one thing in common. We keep America going. America goes on Dunkin' and Clint. DC stands for diluted crime rates in the DC area. I've actually never been to the District of Columbia, but boy, would I want to meet a lady from Columbia, not the District of Columbia. Well, maybe the inner city District of Columbia, because they don't have ties to the government, even though they probably do some work for some senators, if you get my drift, under the table. Wink, wink. Oh, Monica, you got a friend in me. And Bill Clinton. Hey, see what I did there? Get it? Under the table. Because she gave Bill those Bill of Rights. And now, like, he can't even speak anymore. He's like, oh, oh, oh. His eyes are always so red and circular. I appreciate him knowing, the shapes. Oh my God, you're back. Baby got back. Maybe no back. Throw it back. Baby got back in the rib cage. And crickets be pooping like a rampage. Jackson. But yeah. They call me Shampoo Poppy, because once I'm in your hair, you gotta pull out the knots, and ready or not, the boy is hot, and I pull off the tip like a cop. I'll make your panties drop. Now, what am I freestyling right now? All right, here's the freestyle section. I'm going back to the old days of off and beat, hence in the name. I always told, when I started the podcast, I always insinuate that I was going to always just randomly throw little raps in there, because I used to put my little raps in the audio section to promote, not even promote, but just to show my talent, if you want to call it that. All right, check it. Oh, yeah, she dropped her panties on the spot. Ayy, little did she know I like tater tots, cause she crispy and she miss me. She wanna know, baby, I'm like Scottie Pippen, except my son isn't dating Michael Jordan's son, cause that's the tag team that I didn't want done. Oh, Larsa, why you causing arson in my life and financial being? And that's why Scotty's broke. Scotty Beam, cause I'm a state of the culture. Oh, Joe, don't be butting the holder. Oh, no, man. Rory just had a baby. Oh, no, man. His album rollout was like, hey, baby. It's funny how he used to shit on the baby for having views at a Rolling Loud concert. And now he's having an album rollout with the baby. Oh, Rory. You know, I haven't talked about the pod in a while, like the Joe Budden and Rory Mal incident, because it happened literally like a year and a half ago, so it's kind of old news. But, you know, they'll take little shots at each other. Joe has a nickname for them called the Bare Minimum Boys. And, you know, actually, if you guys remember, you know, for the core fans of the pod, when that whole split between them happened, and I was on Rory Mal side, because I honestly felt like, you know, forget the band standpoint, I wanted to focus on the show part, where I feel like, honestly, they were more of the attraction for why I came to the show, personally. Joe was entertaining, still is and stuff, but you see, one thing when you do this and actually, like, have aspirations that take this serious and be taken serious in this one day, it's kind of ironic I say that, being the fact I technically look like I do the bare minimum, even though I take a lot of fucking time to make this shit happen. So you know what? Bare naked boys. Who needs a Naked Brothers band, baby? Because I'm your real naked knight. Get it? Because I'm orange hat. All right. Alrighty. Oh, that was bad. Which technically, you know, they're the most successful Nickelodeon brand music-wise. Like, they're the most successful Nickelodeon musician in terms of TV shows in their company's history. I just learned that like a week ago. They had the best sales. Just take that for what it's worth. Even more than Ariana fucking Grande. Let that process in. Yeah, no, if you guys remember the Rory Mal split with Joe Budden like a year and a half ago, the whole like accounting thing, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, one thing you kind of point hits, you see the hints that Joe puts out, and you're like, I don't know about that one, because you don't know when people in a group setting, when someone is running the show and technically they were employees under him, all they had to do was come in, do the pod, and all the other stuff was typically taken care of by Joe Budden or, you know, the team he hired that takes care of the podcast. And you see, like, he kept the show to be respectable, right? When you actually look, because now the Rory Mal Podcast, I'll catch a clip here and there, but I haven't watched a full episode in a while, because it really does kind of seem like, man, like, it feels like they just show up and don't, like, if you guys listen to podcasts or watch shows, you can tell when someone is there just trying to fill the time quota. It's no different than when someone goes to a job and they're just looking at the time like, yep, I gotta get my 8 hours today, or, you know, work my one shift, whatever it may be. And with podcasting, it's a regular thing for algorithm purposes, and people are more likely to click on that 1 hour plus podcast and a 40-minute podcast, because it typically shows that, oh, it's a better episode. Typically, the longer the episode, the better it indicates to the audience, even though that's not always true. Sometimes they need to drag it out like fuck. But when you actually kind of look into this stuff and you're like, you see, like, okay, And you see Joe Budden's podcast consistently is like 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours sometimes. And, whether that's your preference or not, the point is like, it sounds like there was a plan put in place when you listen to Joe Budden. Even if it seems like they're just shooting the shit and there's going to be some natural things that come up that maybe wasn't planned. But you sense that there's a direction. And you can tell Joe takes it like that. He takes it like he's a showrunner. And I actually watched the interview of him on Earn Your Leisure. They did a interview with him. Like, it was probably months and months ago, but I saw it recently. He said, my goal is honestly to sooner rather than later to not be in the seat, to be in charge of other people's podcasts. And, maybe come in here and there as a guest or something, but because this is work. When you take it like work, it becomes work. When you do this stuff multiple times a week, put X amount of hours, and then you put the time and effort, the mental energy, and you actually put into it, you have a different feeling and attachment to it. That's why he's considered one of the podfathers, even though technically he didn't start podcasting at the earliest age of inception, but especially in the stream of quote unquote when Joe Budden Podcast first started, it was technically like a hip hop cultural podcast or whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of transformed to a very multiversity podcast. So, but what you notice, all you have to do is look at the two shows now, Joe Budden and Rory Mal. It's been over a year and a half. They've had some time to establish their style of show, their creativity, what they want their show to be. And there was a comment that Ish on the pod, or it was Ice or Ish, one of them said about Rory is, indirectly was like, look, before the show was just shits and giggles. Now we can actually have some real talks with guys like us on the show. And you're like, whoa. And what did I used to go for the Joe Budden pod? I used to love the banter. I used to love the impromptu type of dynamic they would have. It was more funny than anything else. And the thing is that's good when there's a lot of substance to the show. And there was still a lot of substance because when they would talk about music, they would get passionate. They have different of opinions on things, which kind of brought that seriousness and the funny dynamic. There was a structure to the show. They always open with 20, 30 minutes of just starting the shit, and then they would ease into the episode, introducing the podcast. Then they would have a list that they would get to, but it wouldn't sound looking back. It didn't feel like they had a list, but you could tell they had things in mind, and they naturally let the show go at a natural pace to make it happen. And so the bare minimum boys, as Joe calls them, and I'm a big Rory Mal fan, but when you look at the differences of their show now and how much influence it really feels they have on their own show, my thing is, I know Joe Budden has a lot of people on his show, more guests on a regular basis. Sometimes they'll have 6 or 7 people on the show at a time, and it's the same cast of characters. Now, they have a pretty consistent, roster of people that they consistently have on the show. But you still know, who the main ones are. And Joe is leading this ship. Nothing happens on accident. No one's going to be brought on the show that doesn't actually contribute to the show. And they're not being, and when you listen to Rory Mal's podcast, I know it comes from a very, very unsuccessful podcast at this point, trying to criticize a successful podcast, but I'm not really criticizing, but I am comparing and contrasting what Joe is kind of getting at here. So you see, they don't even have, control of their own show. You have, they be having 4 other people, but they feel like they're the producers in the background having this input, feeding them of what to talk about. But they don't actually have an idea of what they want to talk about. It feels like it's hey, we're gonna come in, just try to have stuff for us to point out some topics, and we'll make shit happen. And that's great. But you don't ever, like, they're afraid to get too deep into stuff. Like, the only time they're passionate about things is when they're responding to some shit that Joe insinuates to his podcast, when he takes shots at them. That's the only time you actually see them, like, get, like, real feeling about. Everything else, like, they're trying to walk on a thin line. And people point, like, Rory, like, he tries to definitely protect his industry connections. Which I guess if you're doing music, which he now is, like, technically, it's like, yeah, like, I guess that's the thing, because you don't want to alienate people you may potentially work with, or has connections, people you may work with, or worse, well, make sure you don't work with people. But when you're doing a podcast and people come to you for you to say found, like, then when you're trying to, because they apparently I didn't see the episode, but someone pulled a clip where they interviewed Quentin Miller, and he basically was saying stuff about, like, yeah, well, I pulled up and something about Nicki Minaj, like, she basically, he was like, not criticized, but like, yeah, no, this is what really took place. She was like, and he's like, well, and then Roy, so he like immediately like, well, you know, we don't know, and he's like, well, no, I was there. He's like, well, you know, we can't say for certain, you know, we gotta protect. He's like, I mean, sure, I guess, but nah, I mean, I know what I saw. And it's like you cannot try to be defensive of everything and just be like, oh, when you see stuff like that, it's like, man, like, are you like afraid to actually speak or let someone speak something or about someone that just because you like them, they may say something that's kind of, you know, may not put that person in the best light? Because if you truly trust that person's character or whatever, you know that won't stand anyways. But I think it's things like that you see, like, oh, like, it definitely feels like Rory Mal, they're more of in it to collect a check. And honestly, if they can make an income, the same income doing something else that they just partially enjoyed, they would probably do that instead of podcasting. Where with Joe, he has so much personal investment. He has so much of his time, his vision, and all that stuff. He has tried and failed certain things, creating a network, have other. But no matter what your opinion, like, that dude is the opposite bare minimum. He may put too much time and thoughts into it. And I don't really mean that, but if anything, like, you can never say the opposite. And that's where you're like, huh. It's like, and think about, when you are trying to listen to a pleasurable thing, something that's like, listen to podcasts is like a luxury. Like, you're fortunate if you even have enough time in a day to truly listen to a whole podcast or part of a podcast. Why? Like, if most people's lives are going to a job, punching the clock, getting out, and you just look forward to do stuff you want the rest of the day, and you choose to listen to something that you feel like, it's like if you showed up to someone's job and you were sitting in their break room and you were kind of seeing like how they operate at work, except you volunteered to just sit at someone's job for like an hour and a half just to feel what they're doing. That's kind of like what it's like sometimes listening to podcasts when people are in it just for the money or the profit. And as someone who wants to make money doing this, I'm not going to shame you. And it doesn't mean you can't put on a good show most of the time. But I think at times it will show. And people will notice. And when people are trying to listen and enjoy something, they don't want to feel like the people who are doing it are not enjoying it. Or they don't want to feel like the people who are doing it are kind of lazy. And the more and more you actually take something serious and you look towards something, the more you look at this stuff. And as someone who's been looking into gaining a successful podcast, because, you know, I'm in that manifesting stage, you look at this stuff. And that's one example of, I don't want to ever be, no one will ever say I didn't put the time into this. No one will ever say I didn't give a shit. No one will ever say the second I get a check, like, if honestly, the more money I get, the more like probably I will feel more of a pressure than ever to put on a good show. And I feel that anyways, but I just kind of, over time, I used to be 100% on Rory Mal Side, and now I've completely flipped. Because as time goes by, not only maybe your thoughts on something change, but maybe you start to actually see stuff. When you see how people act on their own merit, not when they're in certain environments, that's when you see someone. When someone is in charge of their own stuff, you see like how they actually think about or how serious they take something. And I think now it's like, oh, this is what he meant. It's like all you essentially had to do is show up for our time slotted to do the pod. Like that was essentially their main responsibility. And now that, it's their show. They have this and that. It's like, you see like, it feels like a show that just kind of does it to, because I feel like if they were to just be like, we don't want to do it, I think honestly, there's to an extent, I think there'll probably not be a podcast within the next year and a year and a half, if I had to guess. Because once their deal with SiriusXM is done, it's like a $10 million deal, which is still great money. I'm not gonna like. It's like, would they actually go the independent route, like, and stay with it? Is that really something that they would be into? Is that really something that when you listen to their show, is that like really something like this is a priority no matter what? Like you listen to their show, it feels like a show that's like, hey, look, this is cool and all, but there's other shit that I like to do a whole lot more. And I think a part is like, it's like, do we really want to do this? Like, I feel like a lot of reason why they probably keep doing it is they don't want to prove Joe right. That's a real thing. No one wants the person that told everyone all your faults and then over time to find out that they were kind of right. That's not excusing the maybe misconception of accounting. I'm not saying that stuff didn't happen, but we're just talking about purely like the effort and truly like the passion for the project, passion for their show. Like, I think Joe's on to something. And I kind of see it now. The older you get, the more like you kind of see things like, oh, are you looking from an older man's eye? And I'm a mature man. But yeah. And I'm still a big fan of Rory Mal. Like, Rory Mal, to me, I still prefer the older version of Joe Budden because I very rarely listen to full episodes of Joe's podcast. Like, that used to be something like, man, like the nostalgic of when I worked my job as a delivery driver. Episodes would always drop. What was it? It was always Tuesday and Saturday, or was it Wednesday and Saturday? I think it was Tuesday and Saturday. Every, like, an 8, 9 a.m., I'd be waiting for on Spotify when they were part of Spotify and all that stuff. I'll just be waiting. I had to show up to work at 10, so I listen like 40 minutes before I get to work. And then in between all my morning to afternoon deliveries, it would just be like them getting to the funny shit. And literally, like, that would be like the best part of my day at the time. Like, for real. Like, because they're dynamic. It would, like, very rarely do I actually look forward to any episode of any show now. And I didn't do a podcast then. But that show was a big influence of why I always had desire for podcasts. I listened to podcasts for years before I ever started mine. I studied the shit out of, not literally, but when you listen to something enough, you actually take in like non-explicitive cues of what's important when you do this stuff. Because it looks easy, and some people have a more natural feel than others. But they were definitely ones that inspired me to do podcasts. It may even be maybe the main reason why I wanted to do podcasts. And like, there was other podcasts I listened to, but like, in terms of like, damn, like, this is my type of shit that I like. Like, it would be cool if I had this podcast, and then like, when I, have a podcast where it's like with other people and it's like 2 hours plus and it's that group setting type of shit. Like there's something about those dynamics that you just cannot replace by a solo pod energy. That's why like if you can do this for an income or a living one day, my ideal circumstance would be this show by itself, just me, just when I want to record, just when I just want to talk and get some shit off, and then another where it's like maybe with a couple people. It could be a friend, it could be two friends, it could be a guest written podcast. Like that type of where it's like a full group energy. You could truly get into stuff without just one solo point of view. Like that's what like honestly like really grind. Like that's what really gets my dick hard. But seriously, it's that stuff that like you see and you're like, man, that shit, that's what inspires me. That's what keeps me doing this shit. That's what makes doing podcasting the best. Because no matter, like, here's the beauty about it, right? Anything that you're truly self-invested in, like, honestly, you don't even care about anything else that happens in life. Like, not that you literally don't care. But when other things happen that suck or not as good, it's like, it's not this overwhelming, like, oh, fuck. Like, it's like, damn. That shit's like, fuck. Because, like, you still have something to look forward to, no matter what's going on. And it may even sometimes, like, make you a little bit more, like, grounded. Sometimes it may even make you more humorous, to have a sense of humor when shitty things are happening. I'm very careful not to make a pod, because I think I used to do this early on. I think a lot of people, when they start podcasting, the immediate initial instinct is to just like vent and just like say like what you feel all the time type of thing. And like this, you can't like feel some things and have a idea about things, and it doesn't mean you can never cry or like actually like have some self-reflection. But like people are coming to you, unless it's a specific type of podcast. For a podcast like this, a part like Joe and Rory, people are coming there because they want to hear what they have to say about stuff specifically. And if you are going to get personal, find a way to still make it funny or entertaining. Entertainment for the most part. Unless it's purely educational, it's purely entertainment. Anyone that tries to say, oh, it's for the, like, no. You're voluntarily listening to someone for it. No one's listening. That's not. There's plenty of education out there. That's hours and days full of education that we choose not to listen or watch or read. No, we want a simmered down, digestible, a non-monotheistic, whatever the fuck, where it's not just one feeling throughout. We want multiple feelings of this, that, and the other. We want to feel alive during it, Or at least if it's one feeling, it's one joyous, like, feeling. Like something that, like, changes your mood. Something that ramps you, something that keeps you riveting. And I think as I'm like, I hate when like people that voluntarily do this shit and they don't actually fucking enjoy it. It boggles me. Like people in my position, like we're not making any money doing it. We're doing it just because we genuinely love it and we want to get good at it and we want to one day be worth the shit where people come to our show, listen to it, have a fan base, and maybe be able to make money off of it, but it was done out of the most genuine of places. And when I see people just start shit because it's like, oh, we're going to start a show, and after 5 episodes, start a Patreon. Like, who the fuck are you to start a Patreon? You have less people listening to your show than me. I literally saw, I'm not going to name the show, is this, like, fairly brand new podcast. It's like, it's not really a big podcast or anything. Like, the show's not bad or not. I listened to it. It's like, oh, okay. Like, it's not for me, but like, okay. Like, they got some chemistry, these two people. And they're like, oh, by the way, guys, after our 8th episode, we're going to have a Patreon exclusive for where we'll have episodes up here for a week, and then we'll take them down and put them on Patreon exclusive. And then we'll have some Patreon. Well, once a month, we'll have a Patreon exclusive episode. And I'm like, and I checked their thing. It was like $5, which is like, oh, $5. So I'm paying $5 a month for you to put out one Patreon episode. It's like, you guys haven't warranted that. The biggest shows that have Patreon put out multiple episodes a week exclusively for Patreon, plus added benefits, plus added videos and content. And you have the audacity to think like, oh, we'll just put a random episode a month of this podcast and people will pay for it. It's like, people are barely listening to the free version. Newsflash. And I wouldn't make a Patreon because it'd be a waste of time. And no one listens like that yet or watches. And I'm being honest about that. And it's just like, I'm all about creators finding ways to make money and stuff, but like, you got to have a sense of like realness. And that's where that delusion that's when you see that shit like, oh, these people don't really care for the actual enjoyment or the love of it. And I don't want to get too cheesy about it, but this is a profession where when people can tell you're not into it, they'll tune out. I was listening to, I can even tell, like Joe Rogan, for example. I was listening to part of his Bert Kreischer podcast today, the one that dropped today, because, he has like his movie, The Machine, and all that stuff coming out. And you can sense, like, with Joe, with his comic friends. I've noticed this. It happened with Joey Diaz, and there was someone else I felt while listening. Compared to other guests he has, where he seems to be more into it. Where I feel like when he has like his comic friends on, he's not really like in it. Like, he's like going along with it and he's like laughing and stuff here and there, but like he doesn't really feel like he's like present. It feels like he's just trying to kind of like get through it. He's trying to let them get their shit off, but he's not like personally like involved with it, if that makes sense, compared to if he has someone that actually feels like it's going to teach him. Because I feel like he has such a low, like, not standard, but I think he's just older. So he's like, he's taught these people multiple times on a personal relationship standpoint. And except when he does Protect Our Parks with Norman Gillis and Ari Shaffir, that's when he's like fucking all in. But like when he just has like one of his, like, it almost seems like he didn't even want to do the podcast. He's just like, oh, yeah. He's like, haha, yeah, my wife wouldn't go for that. Like, he just seems like he's kind of like a moderator more than a person conversating. And I've noticed that. And I'm not going to blame him for that. I mean, dude, the dude's at episode 1,990. Like, Jesus, like, I'm at episode 1. This is episode 196. Think about it, and this thing has taken me 2 years of inconsistent schedule. By the way, I'm coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this pod. Think about that. He's almost at 2,000 episodes. And this dude still, even though he's financially has a lot of incentive to want to do it, but this dude has never just like taken a month-long break from podcasting. And he's got so much shit going on. He has all the money. But I don't know. I just found like I just kind of noticed that. Like my point that was is you can tell when someone's just kind of there or doing it because they may have an obligation, or when they just kind of like don't really want to be there, but they're just putting on a good face. And podcasting there's so many, and it's so voluntary that anytime someone feels like you're not into it, why the fuck am I gonna be into it? So yeah, I guess I'm a bare maximum boy. Well, there's the title of the podcast. It literally only took me to the end. But yeah, episode 196 of the Often Be Podcast with Clint Nelson. I'm your host, Clint Nelson. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, subscribe. Appreciate the continued support. But yeah, guys, most important, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to suck some titties. I'm not sure if I said at the beginning, but it's in the video now, so YouTube can add that to their processing. There's a reason why it takes 5 hours of freaking process a goddamn video. But yeah, guys, whenever this is posted, have a great day. Meep, meep.